All right. So, just gonna my team, just dropping, and then go. I'm going to finish the bowl of this on the inside, and then I'll finish the outside. So. Right. There also gets to be a depth beyond which it's difficult to get in at all the angles. So that provides a practical limit to how deep the bowl can go also. I think one common struggle is sort of going too deep with the bowls because you don't know the cues of, oh, I should probably stop now. And then you end up struggling to clean up mistakes that were made in the last couple of cuts when you really should have walked away. And so as you gain more experience, that's part of what you gain, is the ability to recognize, oh yeah, this feels like I should be done. I'm going to wrap things up and walk away. And there are great time savings to be had in that. There we go. I'm also trying to get exactly the line I want on the inside rim so that I can use that as a datum to match the outside rim when I trim it up. Good. those cuts are hard on your hands. Okay, now this quadrant is the last quadrant to get cleaned up. Okay. I'm basically there. There comes a point in every spoon when you need to admit to yourself when you're less likely to make the problem better than you are to make the problem worse by continuing. And something as big as a ladle definitely reached that point. Okay, good. So now my bowl is done, as deep as I can get it. I can tell just how much I need to remove from the outside. A fairly good, even, matching curve on the center. The thing I need to do first is trim up the outside rim and get it to match what I had on the inside. And that way, that should change the symmetry of the things to get it more symmetrical. So you'll notice how at each step, I'm not simply saying, oh, what I did before is perfect, I'm going to stick with that. I'm sort of trying to get it even more perfect with each step and then use that more perfect result to sort of ratchet everything else up to being more perfect themselves. So I'm not trying to say, okay, I'm going to get it perfect right at the beginning. Instead, I'm going to say, let's make it more perfect, and then we'll use that as the sort of the litmus test for making all the other things more perfect. And in that way, I can kind of ratchet a spoon up and up and up towards being more and more perfect. Whoa, my battery's low. We'll see if that's going to last long enough. I wonder why my battery's low. It didn't charge very well last night. Yeah. So you can see getting the rim trimmed. And this will go a long way towards making everything look more symmetrical. Okay, now let's see. It's not a great angle. There's no, because of the way the crank is, there's no one angle to be able to see whether you've got the rim perfect or not, at least not from the camera's perspective. Just a little bit more taken off here. Okay. Good. I like to have a nice thin rim on my ladle. I guess I like to have nice thin rims on most of the things that I carve. All right, so now I've got the rim the way I want it. There you go. You can see it like that. And smooth it out a little bit. So now, before I move on, I'm going to put the micro bevel on the inside. I'll probably put the micro bevel on the outside as well. So I use the hook, right, for the inside, because there's no danger that it's going to get in there and stab the center of the bowl the way the Sloyd knife would. Okay, good. Now we'll do, hi Matt. Now we'll do the outside rim so that I know where that stops. And then I can do the outside of the bowl. And that's going to take a while because it's such a big surface and it's so much end grain. And for a ladle to feel good, it has to be nice and delicate. It has to be lovely and delicate. Because if it's not, then the whole thing will feel top heavy. Or I guess bottom heavy, because that's the way you hold ladles. Good. All right, so now got the rim the way I want it. Got that the way I want it. And now to do the back, I usually start right in the what's going to be the deepest point and establish that first. And spread out from there. Because I want that deepest point to also be the thickest point. So by establishing that first, it helps me figure out sort of how much to take down for the subsequent ones. And again, with ladles, because they're so big, it's kind of awkward. It's a lot of sort of big hand squeeze cuts that, because they're trying to be so powerful, they can be tough on this part of your thumb. You can see how calloused that is. And I'm careful as I get close to the rim. You don't want to just blitz through that rim. All right, a little more taken off. And the reason I'm do it this way is that you can spend a lot of time on the back if you aren't systematic about it, sort of going back and forth, getting it to a certain degree of delicacy, and then deciding it should go thinner and getting it to the next degree of delicacy. It's just a lot more efficient if you can sort of get it awfully close right off the bat. But again, that requires a certain amount of experience of how close you think you can get it. So you can see I'm going back and forth in the same spot, occasionally pushing down the edges on either side so that they don't get in the way. Particularly this back edge. But you gotta be careful not to grab too far back or you'll split the wood. All right, now we're getting close. Interesting, I hadn't noticed till now. I have this one particularly large hook knife cut. Well, we'll see if that comes out or not. All right, so now I'm feeling like this. So I could go a little further, but I am getting close. Now, here's one important detail. Notice I said close, not finished, and that's because if you try and get it to the perfect level of delicacy right off the bat, you're going to make it so delicate that the force required to remove the other stuff is actually going to jeopardize the remaining strength in that most delicate part of the spoon. So you got to get it close, but while it still has plenty of strength, you got to spend time bringing everything else to that same level, and then you go back and do everything one last time. And notice I tend to go from here up to the tip. And at a certain point, it doesn't really make sense to be in the middle anymore for something as wide as a ladle. There's so much end grain. It's easier to some extent to mill way in from the sides, like this. Whereas with most spoons, I would always start in the middle and work my way to the sides. With ladles, to some extent, this bit of material at the tip is easiest done coming in from the sides, ending up in the middle of the tip at the end. Okay, good. Whew. Okay. Have any tips for carving deep spoon bowls out of straight grain? No, this is out of straight grain, and I did a post where you could very clearly see the grain flow in the handle. So you want to leave this part where it's steeper quite wide this way, but it can still be narrow that way. And then when it gets up to here, where it's shallow this way, you can make it shallow because it's wide this way, but also because it's running more parallel with the grain. And the tail flip at the end helps you get that extra little bit like this. So you're never going to get it, you're never going to get a ladle that comes straight down. But honestly, those ladles always seem kind of overkill to me anyways. The challenge with carving deep grain, deep bold stuff, is that you're going to run up against the limits of your hook knife. So you need to have a strategy for dealing with the fact that you're going to hit those limits so that you don't get backed into a corner. The strategy I've always employed is to sort of know when I'm getting close, leave myself a little extra rim thickness, and then when I feel like, because of the chatter marks or whatever, I'm having a hard time cleaning things up, get everything kind of even, and then I widen the rim just a smidge, and then I can get one last set of clean cuts, and then I have to be done. And then whatever needs to come off the back to make that feel good is what needs to come off the back, if that makes sense. So that's my strategy, and it's worked pretty well. All right, now I'm pushing down these back shoulders. Why not? Usually I leave these shoulders real kind of wide and chunky. Let's push these down, make them more delicate. See how that feels. Let this ladle tread some new waters here. Okay, like that. I'll do the other side. Yeah, I mean, wider and shallower bowls are one way of doing it. There's, you sort of gain some advantages and you lose some advantages. Right, you can make them out of a less enormous piece of wood, but to some extent, wider bowls can be more of a pain in the neck to carve, but you get more volume with less extreme crank. That still functions as though it has perhaps a little more crank than it actually does. All right, so now at this point, we're at the point where I used to be done. I used to be like, okay, good, got the right thickness, whatever. But lately, I've been really pushing myself to truly, and by lately I mean in this last year, I've been really pushing myself to truly get things as delicate as I can, as delicate as they functionally can be. So I'm going to do one more pass on this bowl on the outside just to make it as absolutely delicate as it can be. I think you'll find if you take the time to do that with your work too, you'll be surprised at how delicate it can be. I'm making sure that that rim is exactly how I want it. Go, very nice. Now, as you're making these rims and everything more and more delicate, you have to start treating them with more caution and respect, because they won't take quite as much squeezing without breaking on you. So be careful. Okay. Okay. Good. Feeling for thicknesses. There's generally a part sort of right here that's difficult to get to. You have to be careful when you're making these push cuts. It would be possible as you get more delicate going across end grain like this to rip the wood if your knife is not sharp enough and if you're too aggressive pushing it. So you have to make sure that the knife is cutting the wood, not applying ripping pressure to the wood. Good. That's the finished thickness I like. The way I describe it is, I've described this many times before. The way I describe it is when you reach like the right thickness, you can, as you approach it, you can slowly feel the spoon come alive. And there's a point when you reach the right thickness, and you're like, oh yeah, that's it. It just feels better. And so that's how you know when to stop, is when it sort of gets to that point, you're like, feels amazing. That's when you stop. Because there is a point beyond which you're like, oh, it went too far and now it's too thin. That's a shame. So you have to know when to stop. So I try to be realistic when I figure out how long it takes me to make spoons and budget an amount of time that lets me have this amount of care. Because you can see I'm probably going to spend an extra 15-20 minutes on this spoon just getting the thickness to the right level, but it's going to make a huge difference in how good the spoon feels. So I want to be carving spoons that let me push myself to the limit of my ability each time, rather than simply carve the spoon that I can sell at a certain price point and make the most amount of money. Because I've seen spoon carvers burn out and express burnout that happens from letting the efficiency of sort of good enough be what tells them when they're done. So I want a healthy dose of both. I want to both keep in mind that I'm searching for good enough, that state of being good enough, but I also want to realistically set aside the time so that I can push my own abilities to this, because this requires stuff of me that the other carving does not. And I'm a better spoon carver for having attempted it. Okay, good. just have to do these back shoulders. And then I will be done with art. And this is where being disciplined about not returning to the neck, not returning to the bowl, like getting it as good as you're willing to get it, and then being done comes into play. Because you can always look at a spoon this big and find things you could dither about. But it's funny to hear me say that after just talking about how important it is that I take time to push this back. But I think it's worth distinguishing time spent pushing yourself to take something to a level you wouldn't otherwise have taken it versus time spent dithering. Because those are two different things. And I think the first one, the what I was just doing, pushes you to become a better carver in the long term. And the dithering, I don't think, makes you a better carver nearly as effectively. Because it's not purposeful. It's not doing it with intent or purpose, which I think is what matters in terms of making you better at something. So we're deliberately setting out to make something better. Dithering isn't that. Whew. Tell you what, I am ready to be done with this ladle. That is 2 strong hours of carving. Okay, good. And the last thing I'm going to do is just reduce the keel here just a little bit. Just a smidge. Hi, Tom. So the keel, instead of sticking out from the back of the bowl like that, now flows from the back of the bowl. Okay. Just and there we have it. I do if I overdo it, so I need to be aware of sort of where I am on the spectrum of overdoing it, and be good about not overdoing it. All right, there's one spot that I let myself go back on, and that's right here. If that is not a nice curve, it's worth going back and just very carefully trying to make it a nicer curve. Because that's one of these spots where your eye is really going to sort of catch on that. You can see it quite clearly. So I want to take the time to clean that up. Blend those cuts in. But then be done. Ah, so easy to get sucked back in. I like it better than at first, Tom, but I was telling Matt I still love the old one. So I think, I'll be curious to see how my feelings about it, if I can articulate essentially what I think is important about it. I don't think the reason I like the old one is not from a change that Matt made that was deliberate. I think it's from a variable that he wasn't accounting for as tightly as I think he needed to, which, is my role as the product tester, is to sort of say, hey, you didn't take into account this thing. Right? That's how I earn my keep. So in this case, it was it had to do with the way the blade came out of the handle and then started to form its curve. He had let something be a little looser, and I still think it needs to be tighter. I'm not sure I've convinced it yet. Okay. Whew. What a thing. So, 2 hours on the nose, if we count in the time to make the blank, and we have a ladle. And the thing I'm most excited about this ladle is this handle facet design, where it's very trapezoidal. And that happened as part of dealing with some squirrely grain. But I like it so much that I think it's going to be a part of ladles going forward, because it just feels fantastic when you hold it like that. So, okay, my hands are tired. So I can't speak to the Monadnock right now because I haven't thought critically about it since I started using the new one more. Try and analyze what it is. At some point, Matt and I will sit down and try and figure out why I had that initial reaction. But all of the changes that he has deliberately made, I think, are very positive ones. And that's that. Voila. Thanks for watching, guys.